Hello, and welcome to the Mission Strong podcast. I'm your co-host, John Jags Nee, and today we're bringing you our very first episode. We're very excited to kick this off with our host, Justin Yee, owner of Mission CrossFit in Orange County, California. We're going to be giving you a little bit about our background as athletes and coaches and how we hope to share our knowledge and experience with the rest of the world. On top of that, we'll give you an idea of what we hope to accomplish on this podcast with our guests as we continue to produce new episodes. So without further ado, let's jump right into episode number 1 of the Mission Strong podcast with Justin Yee and myself, John Jags Nee.
Welcome to the Mission Strong podcast. This is episode number 1 with John Jags Nee. I am Justin Yee. Jags, how you doing?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, here we are. Episode number 1. So, how'd we get here? Man, let's just start with that.
So, you and I met about a year ago, and you came to our mutual friend in need of a video project for a summer camp that you were putting on. So I was fortunate enough to participate in that, and we made a video program for that. And now I think after having done that, I was like, hey, I really like your mission at Mission CrossFit. Why don't we put together some content for that? Starting with a podcast, I felt like was a good option because we both have similar ideologies when it comes to fitness and training and coaching. I'm also a competitive powerlifter myself, so I felt that with our powers combined, we could try and spread a better message about raising athletes, or raising youth athletes, or just athletes in general, and becoming better human beings overall. So I guess that's kind of where you and I started and how we got here.
Yeah, exactly. Jags did a great job. Came out and shot a lot of footage from a summer camp that we ran this summer, which was towards our youth program, and we were covering a lot of character and leadership development. And I think that, as we were discussing a lot of things about how to capture that tone and that look, I think we got into some good talks about what I try to do with a lot of my athletes and how that's evolved over the years. And so, yeah, that was kind of real interesting when you brought up, hey, we should do a podcast, because at first I thought that's not something I really want to do. I listen to a lot of podcasts, but what do I have to offer? And then I guess kind of took that to heart. Like, why are you asking me to be a part of that? And then I realized, I work with a lot of coaches, work with a lot of athletes here. Like you were saying, at Mission CrossFit, we run a facility here. And so for almost 10 years, we've been training athletes here. And even before that, my wife and I coached at a local high school soccer program, and we worked with athletes there for 4 years. And so it's been a long time coming. And I think over those years, we've developed ideas of how to train athletes and had a lot of discussions with other coaches, with a lot of parents. And I think that's kind of where we're going with this, how to give ideas and concepts to parents and coaches and even athletes about how to create those environments and those situations where we can become better. So that's a lot of what we're going to be trying to do. So, Jags, why don't we even go a little bit further? Why don't you, because that's kind of what our target is, this storytelling idea of, like, who are we? How do we get here? So why don't you tell us about yourself a little bit, like your childhood, how you grew up, and like you said, you're now a competitive power lifter. So what brought you to that?
Yeah, sure. So competitive powerlifting, I started that about maybe 3 years ago. And growing up, I was not an athlete at all. I was that kid in high school that played too much World of Warcraft, drinking Mountain Dew, significantly overweight. I was 250 pounds at one point. And my dad had a heart attack in 2009, and that was he's still alive, fortunately, but I was like, oh wait, I'm not living a super healthy lifestyle. If I keep this up, I'm gonna probably have something similar happen to me. So I started martial arts, taking it seriously, and I did the keto diet and did everything wrong when it comes to doing dieting, and now I'm hovering around 150. And the way I got into powerlifting is I was more or less engaging in a lot of like not super healthy fitness habits, like not eating enough and doing too much. And then just over time I discovered good resources online and sort of taught myself like, hey, being an athlete is not just about like performance. It's all about, there's a lot of mental aspects that go into it. So I got into powerlifting because you have to be calculated in the way you approach your training and your nutrition to be effective. So the gamer in me really was driven to that sort of micromanagement of a lot of small variables to create the best athlete. Not just on a technical side like programming, but like, hey, is your recovery on point and all those things. So didn't grow up as an athlete, but I found it because it helped me realize the gamer inside of me, appreciated like the technical aspects of it, and apply those to just trying to become a better person overall, and use the athletics, this new athletic lifestyle to make me better, I suppose.
So that led right in kind of what we hope to do with this podcast is what is athletics teaching you? You know, you came on much later. You know, you didn't grow up doing a lot of sports or being with organized youth sports in a team setting. So what is it doing for you right now? How does that athletic mind frame shaping a better Jags?
That's a good question. When I think of athletics now, I think of it as small progressions that accrue into large, significant changes over a long period of time. So for me, adding one rep on accessories like Romanian deadlifts is each week doesn't seem like much, but like those small increments over time eventually lead to, like I said, significant changes in performance overall. And I think that those principles that you learn in athletics, like those small progressions, really transfer to life overall, and business and education and health habits. Because when you take skills that you learn in athletics, like learning to push through challenges and teach yourself a new skill, and apply those athletically grounded principles to other aspects of life, you eventually become a more effective human overall, because you have this base of physical manifestation of skill development, and you can transfer that to emotional development. So and I feel like anyone can experience that. Like with your background, I think it's important to also realize like anyone can apply athletic principles into their life, whether they are an athlete or not. It's just that level of progression.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I love coaching youth, you know, and teaching youth, because I think through athletics and through physical challenges, you know, we shape a lot of who we become, you know, and so let's kind of segue into that a little bit, of that the goal of this podcast really, and we'll see in, you know, our next couple episodes here, we're going to bring on other coaches. You know, I'm pretty excited. Here we are in episode 1, but we've already got some good names lined up as far as coming on the show. We've got a doctor of physical therapy coming on. We've got a local soccer coach, you know, who coaches at Concordia University. He's assistant men's coach over there. He's also a head high school coach and coaches some youth teams at a club level. We've got Mark Schubert, who is a multi-time U.S. Olympic swim coach, you know, coming on the show. And then we'll have Michelle Mitchell, who's a U.S. silver medalist in the Olympics for dive, you know, and she's a current coach in the area. And so we're going to have some opportunities to hear from some other coaches on their experience of both being an athlete and then what it's like to coach, you know, and those things that we're doing. So kind of going that in the format that we're hoping to do is kind of tell the story, right? And so sometimes I wonder, what are we doing? Again, kind of going back to that thing, like what am I doing here? And I'm hoping to get out stories and messages so parents, and I myself as a parent, I have 5 kids, and my oldest kid is 17, she's a junior in high school, and then my youngest is 8, and she's a second grader, so we've got a wide gamut there. And as a parent, as a coach, as a business owner, all these things come in, and what I realized over the years is raising kids is really hard, and then couple that with this idea that I need to improve all the time as well. So I'm trying to balance this idea of self-improvement with being in a teacher mentorship role, and then having, we were lucky enough over the last 10 years to build quite a relationship with a lot of coaches in the area, that we have a couple hundred athletes that come through our doors every week. And so what are some of the things that we've seen, and then how did I get here? So for me, man, my father was in the military as a helicopter pilot, and so we moved around a lot. And I look at my youth and my involvement in both my education and sports really shaped who I was, and what did it do for me? Really, it helped me to cope better as an adult. And so maybe that's a lot of what I'm hoping to accomplish through this medium here of just talking with our guests, with you, and discussing ways that we can hope to give our kids. When I say our kids, what I'm talking about is this generation that's coming up. Not just our kids, but our role in the community. That idea that it takes a village, and it takes everybody to kind of to want to help their neighbors, want to help their neighbors' kids, and take care of their own kids and take care of themselves at the same time. So again, I grew up, my father was in the military as a helicopter pilot. My mom was a school teacher, and we moved around a lot, and so I think that right there, I tell kids in our program all the time, like that was hard moving, going to a bunch of different elementary schools. I think, I went to 5 different elementary schools in 3 different states, so one of the things that I learned was, how to make new friends, how to say goodbye, how to kind of move on. And I look at that, and that's an important role, because every aspect of my life, you have to meet new people. You got to kind of move on from the old version of you, so those were challenges that I look at that were instrumental in me becoming who I am today. And so, going with that kind of led into what I talk about and teach all the time with our youth is, back when I was growing up, we had a lot more freedom on the playground, and so we picked teams, and when you're the new kid, you get picked last all the time, and it's not out of spite, it's not out of anything like that. It's just the nature that they don't know who you are, they don't know what you're capable of, and so why would you get picked up higher, until you prove yourself, and so that's the way I looked at it. At least that's the way I remember it now. I guess I shouldn't pretend that I have a great childhood memory, but I've drawn over those thoughts of reflecting back on what they did for me, and I think it taught me that I had to prove myself, that I had to prove that I had maybe the skills to play that game, or what I started to notice is at a young age that, if you were good friends with somebody and they liked you, you got picked earlier, and it wasn't always skill based, it wasn't always talent athletically based, and I think that's an important thing that we try to tell kids. Not that you just want to do things to make you liked, but that your habits as a kid and a teammate is important, and whether or not you get chosen and people want to be around you. So that character development is really a big deal. So then reflecting on that and then moving around, my parents kept me really active. I think I was that kid that got frequent calls home to mom, that won't sit down and won't be quiet, and that type of stuff. And fortunately, I had a mom that was a school teacher, and so I think her normal response to my teachers was give him more work. He's talking because he finishes his work, and then he needs to be busy, so give him more to do. And so I think she took the right approach to that. Right? There's ways to channel that energy and into a positive direction. So I think with that, that was a natural push to making me participate in sports. So the first sport I remember playing on a team sport was soccer. I think a lot of little kids start with that. But my family was active. I started water skiing at a very young age. I was introduced to a lot of things. My mom was like a state champion bowling, and so the family went bowling a lot, and I remember when I was in elementary school, I was in a bowling league. I played soccer. My parents got me into martial arts at a very young age, and and actually it was martial arts that got me into this desire to teach. I remember on day 2 of my Taekwondo journey, I think I learned 3 moves the first day, and then the next day, like my part of the class was me teaching those 3 moves to somebody else's, who was his first day, and I was 8 years old, and here I was on a Marine Air Station in Hawaii, and that was, I guess maybe that's the way the Marine Corps does things, right? They teach, and as soon as you know something, you teach the person below you, and it doesn't matter what your rank or age. I think that's what I learned very quickly, and that was probably if we get into go into depths of confidence for young people, it's giving them responsibility, right? So I think early on as an 8-year-old, here I was being told that I had the skills to teach somebody else something. Man, I think that's important, right? When you have a skill that is valued, you feel good about yourself. And so that was my journey, I think, partly into teaching and doing that type of stuff. And then what did I learn through martial arts was trying to be the best version of you very quickly, right? A lot of the style of Taekwondo was learning katas or forms, and it was a series of moves, and you got kind of judged on how well you did those moves, and it was just you, right? And then they had sparring, which now you introduce competition, right? And so like every 8-year-old, I was competitive, and in my little 8-year-old world, I was pretty good in my little pond in Hawaii. And I remember we made the trip to the mainland. We went to Reno for a tournament, and I placed second in the forms, and that, I guess that kind of surprised me at first, because I just thought I was going to take first. First competition, I don't know why I would think that, and then I went to sparring, and then took third, lost, right? And I remember it's all point system, and and this is something, it's funny, I don't remember a lot of my athletic games and sports, and I still remember that losing match, because I remembered the points that the other guy scored to end the match, and I remember I started crying, and I think I expressed to my parents that it hurt, but I knew it didn't, right? I was just upset I lost, and I think my parents did a good job of not giving me attention because I thought I was hurt, but expressing like, oh, okay, then you need to get over it. Maybe you should have blocked that kick. It was kind of like, what can you do to improve that? Like, you lost, so what? Right. Move on, right? And so I learned a lot of lessons as a kid, and generally you learn them. I think a lot of us parents and people, we know that is that we generally learn through our trials and our tribulations, and when things don't go right, and so what did I learn there? I learned I wasn't as good as I thought I was, and then I needed to work harder, right? And I remember still having support of my parents. I don't remember them being upset that I didn't take first. In fact, skipping ahead maybe a little bit, in high school I played relatively competitive soccer on some high level teams, and the only thing I ever heard from my mom from the sideline was like, tuck in your jersey. It's like, that's what we had to do. Like, she didn't care about working hard or winning or anything like that, and never really brought that up. It was always like, how are you acting and what do you look like on the field, maybe, is what I was taking from that, right? It didn't matter about the wins and losses. It really mattered on how I was playing and participating. But she never coached me, never gave me insight to the game, just supported me quietly from the sideline. And I think that's something I haven't done very well early on as a parent, sitting quietly on the sideline. And my mom still attends a lot of my kids' games, and she has to elbow me every once in a while to kind of be quiet on the sideline. And so she's been a good influence on that. And that's an interesting concept too, because I in many ways I feared my mom, and not in a way of like, in a way of if I knew my report card wasn't as good as it should have been, I was worried about her disappointment. And I think and she kept me in line. She had very kept me in line in a way of like, I don't know how she did it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? She's not a towering woman by any means. She doesn't have a strong physical presence where you want to fear it that way, but it was a way of just laying down what her expectations were, and that she expected me to do my best to become that. And I didn't grow up with great grades, and yet I tried to go into challenging classes because she didn't stress the need for straight A's. She stressed the need for quality effort and giving your best, and then you can be okay with those grades. She pushed towards the honors classes, I think, and I strove to be able to be in those classes, but rarely got A's in my honors classes. And that never seemed to bother her, and then I reflect on that, right? Because it was a challenging place, and even though I wasn't getting the grade, right, I learned how to study. I learned how to work. I learned how to struggle.
Yeah.
And I look back on that, and I think it's one of the best lessons I learned, right, is we don't have to put kids in environments where we know they're going to succeed all the time. That might actually be detrimental, and I think I think as we get into conversations with other coaches, we might find that. We might find what's really important is developing the character of our young people through sports.
Right.
Right.
I really like what you said there about it's not about the quality of the performance, more the quality of the effort. And that's one of the things that it kind of resonates with what I mentioned earlier about like the micro progression that you observe. Everyone's going to progress at a different rate, and acknowledging that level of progression is more important than saying, oh, well, this person is progressing at this rate, why aren't you? And I feel like that's a big trap that a lot of young athletes or aspiring athletes run into with the product of social media and exposure to so many more avenues of other people's success. We end up being more self-conscious, and obviously this could expand into a whole separate episode if we want to.
Yeah, we could spend hours and hours talking about that, right? I think, and hopefully that's where these shows are going, right? It's just through stories, is to kind of remind parents and remind ourselves. I think is important on this is that it's a long journey. It's a long journey, and we all progress at different rates, and different things and trials will come up in our lives that maybe take us off track for a little while. And then I think a lot of times as parents we have this goal in mind of we want our kids to go to college, and then maybe we want them to get a scholarship, and then maybe we want this and this, and it's like, yeah, those are good goals, but what does that really mean? And I think we're going to explore that in upcoming episodes. Like, yeah, we want our kids to get into college, but how? And are they learning? Are they just passing tests? Are we setting them up for the real qualities to be successful? And that's a lot of what we hope to discuss and accomplish through this, and bring on some other perspectives of that, right? And so a lot of it is, I guess what I'm hoping to do with this is create a community. Yeah. Right. A community of people that have an influence on children. We were kind of talking about that before we went live here. Is like, who is this for? It's for parents. It's for coaches. It's for grandparents. It's for anybody that has any type of role in a kid's life, which then I think pretty much includes everybody. Right. I've got neighbors on my street that have kids that are grown, and they don't have any kids in their house right now, but they look after my kids, and I know they're out there with my kids' best interest, making sure that they're okay. And that's kind of what we're looking for, right? Is that community. We're trying to educate parents on how we all work together to shape the kids. And so that's one of the big things, and that's near and dear to me, because I think sports and the influence my friends' parents had on my life was instrumental to me. I think like many of us and many kids, my parents got divorced, when I was in sixth grade, and that was probably a tricky time for a sixth grade, seventh grade, junior high kid to be dealing with that. And I was already had a lot of energy, and now I had some maybe some anger on top of that, and some misdirection. And fortunately, I had good teachers. You know, I only remember like 2 teachers from junior high. Miss Benson, my 8th grade history teacher, and then Mr. Baker, my PE teacher. You know, who allowed me to excel. You know, and saw that that I had some energy and channels, and gave me opportunities to do that. I had, you know, I was really lucky. I kind of look at that as my childhood. I got really lucky. I was again involved in sports, and you know, now having a single mom, and you know, again, a dad that was in the military, so he's deployed a lot. wasn't really around. And that's just the nature of that. But a lot of kids deal with that. A lot of parents are dealing with that, and so that's kind of where this show is hoping to go. Is to break down some of these social media picture perfect worlds, right? And that even as parents, that we have to live in this persona that we're doing everything right, and that everything's perfect for our kids, because it's not, you know. And then we know we know that, and our kids know that, and so I think that's a whole nother episode of being careful not to live the lie, right? I think that's dangerous, especially when things really go wrong. And so, you know, I had a lot of parents that of teammates that took care of me, drove me everywhere. You know, took me to practices, took me to games, took me to tournaments. You know, I have a brother and sister that are 7 and 9 years younger than me. So my mom's focus was on them. You know, and I was, you know, fortunately in the hands of the community, and they did a good job, I think. You know, you know, I was able to be an above average athlete, I think, in high school. I liked to play a lot of sports. You know, I was a varsity soccer player, but I also did cross country. Did okay with that. You know, I think as a freshman, I was probably, I think I was our 3rd best freshman, you know, which sounds pretty good, but our other 2 guys were varsity cross country guys as freshmen, and one of them went on to be, you know, a state champion, you know, by the time we got done high school. So while I was pretty good, I wasn't the best. And I think that was a important thing for me to learn. That was really good. It drove me to want to be better, and then to realize, like, if I couldn't be the best in one thing, there was other options. You know, and so stuck the soccer route, tried volleyball, but you know, I'm not very tall, so wasn't going to have much of a career in that. And even tried pole vault, you know, in track as my senior year, and did all right with that. I think because of this athletic base that I had, you know, playing and doing multiple sports all the time. Like I said, growing up water skiing, growing up playing tennis with my you know, with the family, and my dad got me out on the golf course and doing martial arts, and you know, doing all these activities led into this concept of athleticism. You know, what does it mean to be athletic? You know, and I think a lot of coaches we're trying to bring that and wrap our minds around that. And you know, for us, it's that ability for students of the game, regardless of age, is how quickly they can pick up stuff. You know, and then we're getting into the neuroscience of it, right? Neuromuscular stuff. And a lot of studies say, hey, if from 3 to 6 years of age, you want to expose the kids to as many athletic things as possible. The brain is forming at a very rapid rate. And so maybe that's some of the funny things we can laugh about here, that, you know, if your kid wasn't doing a lot of things from 3 to 6 years old, then they're not going to be a professional athlete. They don't have the capability. That's more of a joke, but maybe there's some truth in that. You know, is like, what is the athletic potential of our kids? You know, and the reality of it is, what is it? Probably less than 1% will become a professional athlete. You know.
And I think it's also, I like what you said, like it should be focused on that minutia of, my kid didn't do martial arts when they were 3, therefore they're not going to be the best martial artists. It's all on a very case-by-case basis, and by focusing on that minutia and not just be like, what can we do now, you end up missing the forest through the trees, so to speak. Like, what's important for that person overall? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that goes into maybe at least what I just heard, right? Is not to hyper specialize either. Because that's dangerous in itself, right? Because if you only play soccer, there's only a certain number of skills they really learn as a soccer player, and it's not overall athletic, right? You don't throw, You don't throw in soccer unless maybe you're a goalkeeper and you throw the ball out once in a while, but you're not throwing. You're not swinging a bat. You're not swinging a hockey stick. You're not doing a big variety, and so you get very limited on your athleticism or athletic endeavors, and therefore your overall capability is a lot less.
Yeah.
And so you want to, I think early on, right, we'll discuss this, you want to expose your kids to as many sports as possible. And I think that continues into high school.
Yeah.
I believe that athletes don't really need to specialize until they're well into puberty, really. Because that's when the body starts to really change and adapt, and we're going to start to see what some of the maybe real potential is.
Yeah.
And so leading up to then, what are you developing? Just the neuromuscular pathways. You're developing skills, right? And then maybe more importantly, we're developing the character traits.
Yeah.
Right. And that's really what I want to get into with a lot of this and I think that's what we're going to find as we, a lot of our early guests coming on are coaches that I've known for a while and that I've had a lot of discussions with. So I can kind of preview that I have an idea of where those are going.
Yeah.
And where the character and where those things, the character traits, are largely the biggest determiners on whether or not young athletes go into the higher maybe college levels and that type of stuff. Is that it's more on the character traits, personality, leadership abilities than it is on just the skills of the sport. While very important, the character is equally, if not more important.
The mental aspect is just as important for athletes as the physical, because you can be technically the best at something, but if they're not confident in it, they're not going to be able to express that technical ability.
Right.
And I think what this podcast will really highlight is the combination of those two aspects, the mental and the physical, into creating, like we said earlier, better people, but better athletes in general, and whether that be youth athletes or just athletes starting out. Maybe they just got out of high school and they've never touched a barbell before. They've never put on a pair of Nikes and went for a run before, but they're starting that journey just the same. And I think it really comes down to the journey, which is what something that I really appreciate, that you always really focus on the journey for the athlete, not just do a squat better.
Right. Yeah, it's the why. I do that, that's been the biggest motivator, I guess is maybe the right word, for our youth, is if we're trying to get them to do exercises and push themselves, is to teach them the why. And what I found is winning, we do this because we want to win, isn't the best motivator. It isn't, and you rephrase it a little bit different of hey, we want to do this so that you can become better, because I think you can.
Yeah. Right.
And you tell them and you give them, and that's where the power lies, right? And I think that's where a lot of the sports is athletic sports and being physically active gives us opportunities to see that we can improve ourselves, right? That if we put in some work, that we can change what we can become, and that's really powerful for young people, right? And I think that's that's a big reason why I coach. It's not for the wins and losses, it's for the stories that come, and maybe this is the biggest reason why I want to do this podcast, is to give parents support, for raising their kids, because it's really hard.
Yeah.
And support in the way that I want parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles, whoever's might be raising those kids, that we're out there to help them and support them. There's been a lot of things recently within my athletes, that trials that they've had to go through. I saw this going way back, I guess, when we were coaching high school, what our girls were going through. Families breaking up, parents getting divorced, and I could relate to that because I was a product of that. We had an athlete's their family's home burnt down. We had all these things go on, which it was those moments that brought our teams together, and then gave them a purpose to why they wanted to work harder to then get a release from the rest of the world through the athletic field, that they could control something. I think that's what sports is great about, is that it gives kids power, gives parents power, and gives, a redirection on what our top goals are. We want our kids to be successful in athletics. And I think, what does that mean? They're going to be successful because they've overcome trials and tribulations. They've overcome injuries. They've overcome, not having the best skills. They've overcome this, right? So that they're ready for, those things that face their lives. And, we've had a number of our kids over the last couple of years who've lost their father suddenly, and I think I've told you about that. We've had a couple boys on my son's soccer team, two, and then I've had one of my swimmers that recently lost her father while at a meet out of state, and so to see these kids and how resilient they are and how much they need the community, right? They need the long term. They don't need the wins and losses. They need people around them that support them, and I think that's what we're looking to do.
Yeah. That's awesome. I think that what you said about community is really the important thing. That's what we hope to create with this podcast. So with that said, let's talk about where people can find this.
Let's wrap this up.
Do you want me to cover that, or do you want to?
This is something we're learning how to do, right? What's the format of this going to be? So I'll pass that on to you, Jags.
Sure.
What are we doing? Where can people find us? And if this went well, or future episodes, right?
Yeah, for sure. So the Mission Strong is going to be the handle for all the social medias. So YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And if you're listening to this either on iTunes or Spotify or Stitcher, SoundCloud, wherever you're listening to, thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this overall. If you want to check out our other content, The Mission Strong, like I said, on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. And on top of this podcast, we'll be producing more content that is hopefully going to help youth athletes and up and coming athletes just become better. So there we are on the social media. And do you want to finish us off, Justin?
I guess any podcast I listen to, right? Hit like, subscribe. How do they do that? And spread the word, maybe. Again, we're just we're trying to form a community, right? And just throw out ideas. I think like what we didn't do today, right, is we're not giving out a list of do's and don'ts. There's too many variables, I think, with raising kids and that type of stuff. So much stuff going on that each kid is uniquely different in so many good ways that hopefully we just hear stories and hear upbringings and hopefully we can relate to each other as we share. Maybe that's where it goes. A lot of struggles, right? Overcoming struggles and adversity, and that's our common bond. And so again, thank you for listening. Hopefully we gave you something that will want you to listen again or keep going on some of the other shows. So
thank you so much, and we will see you on the next episode of the Mission Strong podcast. My name is John Jagsney, and the host,
Justin Yee. Our last name's Ryan, by the way, so that'll be fun.
Not intentional.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, there we go.